Hey horror fools, Dogma here. With HHN 34 fastly approaching and looking like it's going to be one of the best of all time, I feel like we really should look back at last year's houses and give them their final rights and rankings before the new brew come in and steal the spotlight from them. Last year, honestly, was a bit all over the place, but overall still a really solid year at the end of the night. So with no further delay, I present my HHN 33 houses ranked. Probably the best facade of the whole year, but it still couldn't save this house from being last place. A pretty okay house for a movie I didn't see and a franchise I'm not the biggest fan of. Big props for the sewer slash containment portion in the middle of the house, but other than that, everything else is just pretty okay. Probably would have been better if I knew what was going on. Also, for having frozen in the name, the house wasn't really cold, so it loses some points on that, but other than that, it's just an alright house based off a movie that I probably won't ever actually watch. This house lucks out on getting ninth place because I always put original houses over IPs. I'm a big fan of originals when it comes to HHN. It's a comedy house that I didn't think was really funny, honestly. The layout order of the scenes are kind of all over the place and it feels like it ends kind of abruptly, at least to me. Though I'm going to give big positive points for the huge goblin towards the end of the maze, as well as the giant in the middle with its hand. I think that was really neat, at least when it was actually working. It's pretty neat, but other than that, it didn't really hold up to my expectations of what I thought was going to be kind of a spiritual successor to Dueling Dragons. It's still a fantasy horror, but it's not as good as Dueling Dragons was the previous year. Even with being ranked this low, I still consider Museum to be kind of the comeback kid for me, because it pretty much had an uphill battle from the start. It's night at a museum, but scary, but when I think of that, I think of more generic things you might associate with a museum. Like, we get Vikings, which makes sense. I think that Vikings when that happens, but I'm also like, where are like the cavemen and like dinosaurs and stuff like that? Where are like the World War II like exhibits coming to life and attacking, stuff like that? I understand why there were no mummies because we'll get to mummies later. They show up much later, technically twice this year. So, don't want to do mummies again. But I think where this house shines is being a good starter house. Because HHN pretty much starts off kind of the way Epcot starts off. You either go left or you go right. But with HHN, you either go straight or you go right and around. I always go right and around. So that was always the first house there. So it kind of worked out as being like a good start to the day. Well, to the night. And because honestly, I think it had not a bad reputation, but it had a lower one. It always had shorter time, so it was a good kind of time waster house to see, like, it's 11:30, we can go through museum, by the time we get through that we can see how low the other times have gotten if people have left and whatnot.
He's got the baby.
Don't be fooled with this house being ranked this low. Insidious is an excellent house and it deserved winning House of the Year last year. But the reason why it's down here is, well, I'm ranking this based off of things I enjoyed. And as much as I did enjoy this house, I couldn't actually get to enjoy it because it always had really long wait times. If something's that great, and it is, it deserved all the hype it got because it was very nice. But if it's not something you can actually enjoy, if you can't actually get to the greatness, is it really worth being that great? But other than that, I think Insidious was actually really fun. An actual scary house. I think this was probably where most of the scary went this year. And it shows just with like all the different set pieces and all the different monsters from the franchise coming through and coming after you. And I would actually be a lot happier if HHN had more houses like this. If anything, if there was like 3 or 4 houses last year that were all of this caliber, I probably would have been way happier because maybe the times would have spread out and you would have been able to actually get into Insidious more often than I wanted to.
Los monstruos son reales asesinados. Sí, yes, monsters. They walk among us every day. They surround.
I'm a big fan of like urban legends and cryptids, and Monstrosus is actually a really fun house just because I had to go in and do actual research before I went in about these urban legends that I'm not really familiar with because they're from a whole different culture. And I think that was probably the funnest thing about this house, is learning about the fact there's other urban legends and cryptids out throughout the whole world. I have heard that the West Coast version was a lot better the previous time and when it was over there first. And maybe it was also in a different order if I remember hearing correctly. And you kind of see that because it kind of feels like the Whistling Man should have been the third to last before they did the big runoff of all of them showing up at once. But other than that, I think it was a really nice house, and I hope it does well enough. I know it did well on the West Coast, and I hope it did well enough here that maybe we get the sequel house that was over on the West Coast, and that maybe HHN starts to think about doing other cultures' urban legends, because that would be kind of neat. We've kind of done a bit of J-horror way back in the day, but just imagine us going to Japan or to the UK, Scottish urban legends, Brazilian urban legends, Canadian urban legends. I think there's a whole untapped portion of like spooky scaries that could be dipped into that are very easy probably to recreate without needing to also, use big IPs. You can actually just use the horrors from around the world that humans make up for themselves. Triplets of Terror should not be this high up on the list. It is not that good of a house if you only go to HHN for like story. Triplets shows that a bare bones story can get you kind of far, because it's literally just 3 triplets killing people on their birthdays. You get a pretty much a prequel spot in the beginning, and then what I'm assuming is the last of the killings, like it's their final birthday killing, because at the end of the house, like the cops show up, and usually that's where the buck stops, usually when the cops finally show up. The only big critique about triplets that I really didn't like, and it's kind of a thing with a bunch of HHN houses, sometimes the kills or scenes are too long. So when you're being rushed through like the conga line style, either you catch the beginning of it and you miss the ending, or you see the ending and you're not sure what's actually going on in the house. But in the end, Triplets is a good mindless slasher house, which is pretty much what you want out of it. Slashers aren't meant to be complicated or like complex or anything. It's literally just this person's going around and they're slashing people. Enjoy the chaos. I was actually worried this house wouldn't work at all. Not because of them trying to keep it quiet, but because, let's be honest, HHN, the crowds aren't known for being quiet. They'll scream at almost anything. But I think HHN actually pulled it off, because technically it's not really a quiet house. There's plenty of noise going on throughout the whole thing that makes it really interesting, and the fact that it's not just the first movie, it's actually both the first and the second combined, I think makes it easier to make a house out of, because you're not stuck on the farm the whole time. There's actually other scenes from the second movie that make it more compelling, makes it a little bit more actiony, and the animatronics are perfect. I know they're very simple animatronics, but I'm a sucker for animatronics just in general, and to see just even the slightest of like major effort of animatronics in a house, I think is really cool. And I'll never forget the first time going through that house, going through the very first dark tunnel. The first thing I said was, I can't see anything. And then immediately the jump scare came out of off the right, just right into my face, and I realized, yeah, I could never survive a quiet place. I'm just too loud. And here we have technically my favorite IP house, but I think it's kind of funny that they still consider the Universal Monsters houses IP houses, because they're such original stories at this point that it's not really IP. Like, obviously it's an IP that Universal owns, but the houses are so original it doesn't matter. And much like Triplets of Terror, Bloodlines excels with its story, I would argue. I think that's why I like it so much, because it focuses so much on the Van Helsing family, essentially, of how the task of fighting the monsters has now gone to the next generation, and it's her task to go in and keep pretty much the family business going of slaying monsters and trying to stop the new big bad vampire. I give this house major props for having a bad ending. If you go through the house and you pay attention, that house has an absolute worst ending. She ends up getting her head cut off, essentially, or yanked off, and then you're just at the mercy of the monsters on like the very runoff ending. One thing I really didn't get was the bride being there. I guess it was just a way of tying it into some of the other houses, but I don't really think that brought much to the table. I think it could have been just like a one-man army, John Wick style, fighting the monster house. The bride being in there just kind of adds a little extra on top of it. And a house that always has like a slingshot character, pretty much when they come zooming out at you, is always going to get bonus points. That werewolf flying at you was probably my favorite part of that house. It's probably a favorite of a lot of people, honestly, and that's why Eternal Bloodlines gets the top ranking for the IP houses for me, but also the bronze medal overall in the ranking of HHN 33 as a whole. I didn't start my HHN going experience till 24, so when I'm interested in something I tend to look up the history of it and like lore and whatnot, and when I read up on classic HHN houses, they sound a lot like major suites to me. It's just a basic classic idea taken to an extreme with details and a nice budget. It's essentially Kids Like Candy, so what if kids went crazy killer for candy? And that's all you really need to know. I like the idea of the buttons being in the house. That screams really classic HHN to me. Whenever I hear stories of like lore stuff or like really old HHNs, there's always interactivity in a bunch of the houses. I love how the characters on the major sets actually interact with you and acknowledge you as you walk by. It's not just all jumps out and scares. They all actually make faces and interact towards you with items and whatnot. But this house did one thing that really put it in the second place. It made that darn Fast and Furious queue good for once. That area has been slightly cursed for a while now, it seems. But Major Suites, maybe it was just the way they laid it out this year, actually made that look fun and interesting to walk through. And that alone should get it second place in my book.
They should be in smaller pieces, my sweets.
So with Insidious not being here at number one, most people probably predicted this Slaughtered Sinema 2 was going to be taking the first place for me. It's pretty much the perfect like sample platter of a haunted house. It's pretty much the exhibit of, I heard you like haunted houses, so I put haunted houses in your haunted houses. 8 really great ideas that at least a few of them could probably really be stretched out into their own house. And hopefully, like Swamp Yeti, they will get their own opportunity to be at least a little bit more expanded out in the future. The only downside to this house is that you honestly wish that each movie got maybe its own like 4 to 6 room like exhibit show off. But that would make this way too big of a house. That, and I'm honestly really surprised that with it being a sequel house, that none of the actual movies that were in the first one got sequels in this house. And with it being at number one, there's pretty much nothing left to do except maybe do, I don't know, how about a quick mini ranking of all the movies that are featured in this house. We'll go down those 8 real quick. Number 8, Blood and Chum. Probably never going to get actually extended. It's kind of hard to do a Jaws house, I would argue. I think if they ever did something like that, it pretty much would be a ride. Maybe like a Jaws ride. That'd be a good idea. They should think about that. Number 7, Killer Pringles. I really like the idea that it was evil Santa. A lot of times nowadays, when you think of like evil Christmas or scary Christmas, people just go to Krampus nowadays because he's become so popular. We've really got away from the evil Santa, so I'm happy that it was just that, with Mrs. Claus and the elf being pretty much like his little sidekicks and everything. Way better than being like, oh, let's just do another Krampus bit, you know? Mardi Gras murders. It's just a little too short because it's the first thing you see when you go in. But if anything, that could really be a house that gets extended out. It's Universal Studios. There's always Mardi Gras references to stuff. It's only a matter of time before we get a full-on Mardi Gras house. We've gotten kind of that in the past, but I think just a full-on Mardi Gras house would be just really fun. Heavy Metal Hell 3D. You gotta say it like that. That's the rules. This section of the house gives me really big hopes that if we ever get Slaughter Cinema 3, that it'll be fully in 3D. And I think that'd be really neat because we don't really get 3D houses all that frequently. And I think just having a big variety house be in 3D, I think would really make it not only stand out, but it's kind of a hat on a hat, but it's a good hat on a hat, if you know what I'm saying. Number 4, Mummy Strippers Unwrapped. It's just a funny concept. I don't think you could stretch this out into an actual house, but it's just the funniest thing of taking someone to HHN and being like, oh yeah, there's strippers in this house, don't worry. It'll make sense when you get in there, trust me. And just seeing their faces go, oh, okay, sure. Well, I guess we'll go in. I didn't know HHN was that risque. Number 3, Night of the Undead Clowns. This is probably the only part in the house that actually got me a few times. I kind of always forgot this one was there until I got in. I'm like, what is this room supposed to be? And as soon as I said that, just zombie clowns out of nowhere just coming after you. And then they had multiple boo holes for both the scare actors who were there. So if you have a memory like a goldfish like I do, you'll forget that they can also come back around the wall and get you, which made it even funner, and kind of funny that of all things, clown zombies were the thing that got you. Number 2, Zomborgs. I just think it's funny. I like the idea of somehow undead zombies robot people. I think that's just funky, and I could see maybe not in name, but the idea of like zombie cyborgs being in another house in another year actually being a thing, so I think that'd be really fun. And then number 1, Hatchet and Chains Demon Bounty Hunters. If anything, this one probably has the most, I don't want to say house potential, because there's a lot of these movies that could be a nice sized house, but they're also very kind of generic where you could do almost anything with it, where this one I feel would be a really good house but also have really good character to it, which I think is what people want out of a house. They do want the story for originals, so you kind of know what's going on and you can be in that world for at least the like 3 to 5 minutes you have to walk through that house. You want to be able to be like, oh, I understand what's going on. And I think out of all of them, Hatchet and Chains does that the best out of all the motion pictures that are featured in this amazing house. So, delayed breaking news. Hatchet and Chains has already actually been announced as a new original house that's going to be coming this year, and I couldn't be more excited, and I feel it's going to blow a lot of people's socks off. It's been a couple years since we've had an actual Western house, and honestly, I'm all for it. I can't wait for them to actually give us the full story of these two characters and their day job of hunting down demons for bounties. I think that's gonna be a really fun thing to see in a actual full stretched house, and hopefully it comes out way better than I can even imagine right now while doing this little list. Alright, and that's my rankings for last year's HHN. Tell me what you think and what your rankings are. See you horror fools in the fog.
The bounty's a lot higher